Good.
Just make sure I got this going on here.
Yeah, I think this is the first time we're ever doing a video chat
Yep.
where I'm not just reading your work and vice versa. Oh, by the way, I saw Tigers Are Not Afraid during its festival run when we had a screening at the Frida Cinema.
Uh,
It was so fantastic.
yeah, it's a great
I don't
movie.
know if she changed anything after the feedback she got, but I snagged the Steelbook Blu-ray for $10 on Amazon
Oh,
like
that's
last
awesome.
month.
That's
So
awesome.
it's such a wonderful film, and if you like that, because it's one of those films that is into this like modern day fairy tale kind of
Yep.
like feel to it, try Jesse Buckley from Chernobyl and Judy was in a film called Beast from 2017, I think it was, which is
2017.
pretty good. Maybe 2018.
Oops, I wrote best. Beast 2017. Let's see. Sometimes I look up stuff people tell me to watch and it's on my watch list already. Let's see if
Yeah.
this is.
Things that
And it is not. Okay.
uh-huh. So
Yeah,
definitely check
yeah.
it out, especially with Jesse Buckley as a
Right.
rising star.
Mm. Yeah, and the most obvious double feature would be this and Pan's Labyrinth.
Oh
They're
yeah.
similar. Just
Mhm.
like I actually feel like Hereditary and The Witch are good double feature as well.
I really like The Witch for different reasons than most people do.
Hmm.
Mainly because most people view it from a psychological perspective. I view it from, or at least in terms of the rest of the family, not Anya's particularly, but for the rest of the family, where it's like if they're at the lowest point of their existence where they reject God fully because it's not helping, that
Hmm.
could be a very scary thing. And then Anya inversely embraces, that ungodliness.
Yeah, I saw it as like let's say we just throw all the psychoanalytical shit aside and take the movie for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
They're so vulnerable right from the start that like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's why so much of the movie, especially in the center, doesn't even need to have frights because you have that eerie feeling like you're so
Mm-hmm.
exposed spiritually right now. Like,
Exactly. And people, I mean, a lot of audiences, of course, were expecting jump scares and everything, but
yeah.
like maybe a large percent of the population that or demographic that went to see it weren't religious. So, but for those who were, it was just like, okay, I'm freaked the fuck out right now. Because
Yeah.
if I could
Yeah.
feel what they're feeling, I don't want to feel that ever in my life.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I really
So,
enjoyed it. But before we talk too much, let's start this officially here.
yeah.
All
Is it
right.
going to be
So
mainly video record or just audio?
it's
How does it
gonna
work?
my plan is to just because it's such like a pleasure project, just a little thing. I'm not trying to like get it big or anything. I'm
Uh-huh.
probably just gonna upload these to YouTube, and
Okay.
then if and it's a big if like people want the audio separated and posted somewhere, I'll do that. But my
Mm.
plan as of now is just to do like a little YouTube series,
Okay.
mostly just for posterity to look back on and also to get me used to because I don't do shit like this. Like I'm
Right.
not, so I just want to get used to, because when I hit that, as a person, I'm pretty open and I'll talk to strangers. But when I'm being
Mm-hmm.
recorded, I find that I clam up a little bit. So this
Mm-hmm.
is kind of like also a way of me to get past all that shit.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
and
Cool.
if there's any weird thing I touch upon that you don't want to talk about, you just say pass. I don't. There hasn't been yet, but if there is, just let me know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All
Definitely.
right. So to start, state your name, something about you, could be a hobby, your job, anything you want, and then one of your favorite toys as a kid.
Gotta think about that for a minute.
Mm. And if there's a specific toy, that's fine. Or if there was like a toy line, either one.
Okay. Alrighty. Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Sean Woodard. I am the film editor at Drunk Monkeys, and my favorite toy when I was a kid, I had one of those Hey You Pikachu dolls, where like
Hey,
you
you
click.
Pikachu, never heard of it.
Yeah, it was one of those battery operated Pikachu's where maybe I'm misremembering the name. Maybe I'm thinking of
Mm.
the Nintendo 64 game, but like you click the little Pikachu paws, it would light up and say Pika Pika, and then like his tail would wag back and forth. So I was really into one of those when I was a kid.
Okay. You were into, I'm assuming, the show and the games and everything.
I was not as much as a lot of other people, but
Mm.
mhm.
Um, would you rather have to, we're starting a little easy here,
Okay.
a little silly. Would you rather wear for the rest of your life, and you have to pick one, super uncomfortable underwear or a super uncomfortable undershirt?
Let's do the undershirt.
Mm. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. I was thinking about that too. It's tough because at first I thought it was like, oh, this is easy
Mhm.
undershirt. But then I was like, I don't know. Feeling that discomfort all around here, it might get
Mhm. It might
really
get to
intense.
you, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So you're going underwear?
Undershirt.
Oh, undershirt. Sorry. Yeah. All right. I'll have that
Uh-huh.
sent to you today. So it should be there in a few days.
Okay.
Um, have you ever in your life thought you might have superpowers?
Yes. Uh, Funny story about that. So I was really big into like playing like the Spider-Man like Game Boy Advance game, and I'd
Mm.
seen the first of the Sam Raimi films. So I thought now I'm arachnophobic. So after watching that film though, I thought that I had this weird power where it's like I think there's a spider in my room, just randomly look and there's one in the top corner near the ceiling. And then unfortunately I realized how hit and miss it was. So
Yeah.
it's like maybe this isn't a superpower. Maybe that's a good thing.
So was the power that you were materializing them, or that you just knew when they were there?
I don't know. Maybe it's a
Okay.
mixture of both.
I mean, either power would be kind of cool to know when there's a spider around, or it should just make not a bunch, just one spider appear at certain times to
And then
really.
get the hell out.
That'd be a great superhero to just like a daddy long legs is on your shoulder. They get distracted and then you take them out.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
what's the most amount of money you've ever spent on one item of clothing?
Clothing.
Head to toe, could be shoes, whatever.
It might have been for like a suit. Like
A suit?
might have been like $300, maybe.
Okay. Was it worth it?
I think so.
You still have it?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Mhm.
300 for a suit. That's pretty good actually. That's not bad
Yeah.
at all.
Mhm.
All right, take this question to mean whatever you want. You can think deeply about it or you can look at it on a surface level.
Mhm.
Are you a robot, a vampire, or a werewolf? And if you know why.
I would probably say a vampire,
Okay.
in as much that I'm a night owl.
Okay.
And which would be kind of ironic though, because since I'm Catholic, all the iconography I would shy away from.
Right.
But um, yeah, there's just something about that kind of is a little bit more appealing to me. Plus, they also have a good sense of style.
Okay.
Some of
Yeah,
them,
that's true.
some of them. Although the aging thing might be a problem.
So you'd be a vampire who is secretly Catholic.
Sure.
You have to pretend that you weren't around the other
Yeah,
vampires.
exactly. Or no, because like if you kind of want to be like the ones in like the film version of What We Do in the Shadows.
Okay.
Dead but delicious.
Right. Do you collect anything?
Yes, I do. I am a Blu-ray film collector, which is a
Specifically Blu-ray?
very expensive hobby. Blu-ray when available.
Okay. So
So,
like DVD or Blu-ray, basically. Yeah.
mhm.
Okay. I would
So like
say
I have, I think, 4 versions of Suspiria.
that's
Go
awesome.
figure.
Yeah.
Always double dipping.
Yep. It's so annoying being that where it's like I've had In the Mouth of Madness forever, but then a version comes out. I'm like, it feels so weird to just buy a movie you already have, especially if you don't have a lot of
Yeah.
money. But it for me feels so. It's like I have to do this. Like I have to have that version now.
Exactly. Like there was the old New Line Cinema, I think, DVD of it. Then Warner came out with a Blu-ray and then
Yep.
came out with a 4K restorations. Like, wow,
They
shut
put
up,
out
take
a
my money.
they put out a new version of Johnny Guitar, and I'm like, now I got to get this movie again.
The
One of
olive
my
edition.
favorite
Yep,
movies.
I
Yeah,
had to.
it's
I had to
one,
pick that up.
one of my favorite movies of all time. So good.
Yeah.
In a crisis, do you, generally speaking, do you freeze, flee, or fight?
Usually, I'm the level-headed one that tries to kind of take it head on and like rationalize the best approach.
I guess
So
that
I
would
guess
be
it would
considered
be,
fight. Yeah.
yeah, that would probably be the fight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know? Have you ever been in a crisis with someone who had the freeze response?
Yeah. And it's interesting how those kind of dynamics work out in the moment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I feel like
to the spider though, I'm the fuck out of there.
right. Well, it's a legit phobia for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and that whole thing, it's interesting because you could be the super brave, always helpful person, but when there's a crisis, you can't help which one of those categories you fall into. It's just gonna happen. So like I'm a fight as well, but that doesn't mean, oh, I'm a good person. I take it. It's just a natural, almost biological reaction that takes place.
Is it an extension of empathy in a certain way, do you think, or could it be something else?
I don't know. That would be an interesting thing to discuss, because people with high levels of empathy, I would be really curious if they all fall into a certain category. That's really interesting. I really don't know. But there's been times where I've acted and there's been plenty of people around who have all either backed up or just didn't do anything. And I'm the smallest, least capable person there, and I'm the one acting. And it's not even in a judgmental way, because I really think you can't help which one happens to you.
I think in some cases with me, it's like, okay, I've been in the situation or a similar situation where I think I could contribute towards the solution.
Right, right, right.
It's not like you're trying to be like a person who's like, oh, I'm going to take charge because that's who I am, or it's like you're not trying to be the hero.
Yep, it's not a conscious decision.
No, it's just like, hey, I think I understand what you're going through. I'm not sure if you considered this option. I'd like the help. I'm not trying to fix it, but it's just a suggestion.
Yeah, for me, it's just, are you typing?
No, I am not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm getting some weird feedback here.
Oh, I think I was fixing the charger on my computer.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. So what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So for me, it's not even that deep. It's like, like if I see a dog fight, I will run into it to try to help, but there's not like a plan in my head. I'm just being dumb. Like I will get bit to like separate them, and then afterwards be like, well, I shouldn't have done that. I have to go to the hospital now. But it's like, by the time I think that, it's already happened.
Yeah. Otherwise, it'd be like, am I the right person to do this? And if not, it's...
The answer for me is always no.
Yeah. Maybe somebody else takes the lead.
You don't want me being the fight person. Is there a word you always forget the definition of?
A word I always forget the definition of? Oh, actually, I just had to look up one today, pejorative, because I was trying to come up with like a synonym for like to come before. So like, like antecedent, precursor, and I was like, pejorative. No, that doesn't sound right. But occasionally, even with English degrees and with teaching stuff, you forget things.
Yeah.
So it's not uncommon to have to look things up.
Right.
So I can't really think of another specific instance recently, but I assure you it does happen.
Do you have knowing the little I know about you, I know the answer is yes, but just to ask it, do you have a deep emotional connection with a book or a movie?
Yes.
Can you pick one? It doesn't matter which.
Okay, so when you define emotional reaction, how are you approaching it?
The way I thought about it when I wrote the question down, I wanted that person's, whatever their gut reaction is like, oh, they might mean this. That's what I want to hear. Like
Okay.
I don't really have a very
Right.
specific
Okay.
intention.
So for me, one of those films is Stand By Me, because that's the film. I probably watched it way too early. It might have been 8 when I first watched it,
Mm-hmm.
but that movie has stayed with me, and like the relationship between those characters is so strong that it just really formed me. And it was one of those films, probably the film that encouraged me to be a writer,
Wow.
to be that Gordy character.
Right. Did you run out and read the story?
I read the novella in high school,
Okay.
because sophomore year I'd started getting into reading Stephen King, but like very small way because I loved Misery so much. I read the book and then I read Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point I read The Body out of different seasons. And then junior year, my American Lit AP teacher used an excerpt from, when he's describing Ray Brower's, the scene where they find his body,
Mm-hmm.
and just using that as a way to like paint description.
Right, right, right.
And I really like, I guess you could say I really respected my professor, or that my teacher, much more because of that connection there.
What do you think was
Um,
it specifically about that movie that got to you?
the move. The thing is, well, for me, I realized after watching that film a lot, I have this big connection with nostalgia for childhood,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
almost this like innocence thing.
Right.
But what really stands out is the relationship between Chance and Gordy.
So really it was like a friendship type of deal or okay.
Yeah,
And that like touched you in a certain way at that age.
yeah.
Um would you I guess it's horror it like would you consider that a horror movie or
Well, the novella has some more like horror, nightmarish imagery,
right.
but no, I still consider it more coming of age.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
And
Okay.
I actually find that in most cases, King's fiction that's non-horror is probably better than his, main oeuvre
Right,
of
right,
work.
right.
And I'm not saying it's the lack of horror that causes that. I just think because he has a good grasp of character,
Mm-hmm.
and that, that really comes out in stories that really focus on, the relationships. And then if those are informed by horror and it comes naturally out in the story, then
Yeah.
then it transcends it.
Yeah, there's certain things about any type of like narrative art that even if there's a lot of weakness to it, if there's a strong character connection there, I'm in. Like if I
Mm-hmm.
believe something between two characters, I'm pretty much in for the ride.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you remember the
But yeah,
first horror movie you ever watched?
you know what? Like I watched like a lot of crappy ones on Sci-Fi Channel,
Mm,
but I could at least tell you, because I just wrote about this. The one that I first really connected with was The Fog by John
okay,
Carpenter.
right.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the first horror movie you ever watched though. It was just
No, I
an early
don't
one that you
remember.
connected with.
It's that's like the most. That's the earliest one I can remember connecting with.
Okay, okay. Yeah.
But in terms, if I have to go back, I guess the first exposure to horror imagery for me was like that Martin Landau adaptation of Pinocchio, and then when everyone turned into donkeys and everything.
Okay.
That was the first like real movie, non-animated movie I saw, like at a movie theater.
Uh-huh.
And I remember that kind of like freaking me out a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Um
even though that's kind of more like magical realism kind of thing,
yeah, yeah. But that
but yeah,
imagery is terrifying. It could be
that imagery
terrifying.
is
Yeah.
terrifying. There's imagery in a lot of the early Disney films that are just frightening.
Yep.
I think like Fighting the Dragon and Sleeping Beauty is one of those, instances. You have the
Yeah.
green fire and everything.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For
But it
sure.
was like horrifying, but it was just like, this is really cool. I'm attracted to this in a weird way.
Yeah, and because it's so concentrated in certain parts of the movie, you're already in at that point. So it's not like right from the start, it's terrifying you the whole way through. It's like you're already in, you can't look away now. So you said that you mentioned that you're religious. So does that kind of inform the way you see most movies, or are you separated when you're watching a movie? Specifically, I guess horror movies, because so many of them have something to do with religion.
With horror movies, I kind of focus a lot on those if it has religious tropes, because I do write a column called "Finding the Sacred Among the Profane" that addresses issues of spirituality and faith on film,
right?
Particularly horror. But usually, if it's not one of the main themes, I'll just check that experience, in at the door.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then whatever, it's whatever the film causes me to think afterwards. Maybe there's, vague connections that may think about that later on.
Gotcha. Have you seen like The Wailing?
Yes.
There's a lot of religious shit going on in that movie.
That was one of the recent films that really actually made me feel unsettled in a long time. That film really did well at not only just like holding the tension, just slowly building it.
Yeah.
But when it, when it all hit the fan, then it was just like, oh geez.
Yeah.
The payoff is excellent.
Yeah, I know there was like some controversy with that movie, with people thinking that it was saying that one particular religion was right and one was a little bit more like the bad kind of religion you shouldn't follow. There's a lot of, but the thing is, a lot of people, like when I talk about this movie to people, they, at least from my experience, they don't really see those subtexts. They're just like, oh yeah, that was a scary movie, and that's kind of it. And like there's a whole rape thing going on, like there's a cultural thing. There was a lot of stuff mixed into that movie.
There was a mixture of humorous scenes in there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like the one guy that got freaked out at the police station or something.
Yeah.
And it works more so in those types of films, I think, than like something that's totally uneven, like the weird comedy bits like Last House on the Left or something like that.
Right.
Because I think because it comes as an extension of like how we understand a specific character. So it's not just played for laughs or relieving tension or like something like Abbott and Costello-ish.
Yep. I totally agree.
But sometimes you need to balance that. And I don't know. I want to watch that film again.
Yeah,
I just have to carve out 2-3 hours to do so.
Yeah, exactly. I loved that he wasn't some like gung-ho, gun-toting, like I'm not scared of anything type of character. I feel like it made the movie stronger overall. But yeah, there's so much stuff in that movie that I researched afterwards. I mean, I forgot so much of it already, but it's like, oh my God, there's a lot to dig into here if you want to, which is awesome, because if you don't want to, you don't really have to. But there's a lot of shit going on there. Like I totally even missed the whole there's spreading by sex thing going on, because like the girl has a sexual image she draws, and the thing is on her upper thigh. You see the I don't know what the proper term would be, prostitute or whatever it is in the wherever they are. I sound like a dum-dum now, but I used this happens to me all the time. I do research and then I get really obsessed and then start forgetting everything. But she like has the disease on her neck, and she's talking to a bunch of men who we're assuming are going to sleep with her and also become there's a lot of shit going on there that I found really interesting. And especially like, one of the main monsters is like Dracula. There's always a religious thing going on with that shit. Always.
Yeah.
So I assume being someone religious, that would feel a different way for you watching it than someone else.
Right. Like I rewatched The Exorcist the other day at a drive-in. And that's one of the films that I actually didn't watch until I was in high school. I remember growing up, my grandma mentioned it, like, oh, I would never watch that film, or I promise I'll never watch the film. And then like I happened to be with my dad one day and there was a documentary about it, because it was right around the time the 2000 version you've never seen was released,
Right.
the director's cut.
Yep.
And then I eventually watched it because I was like, well, if I'm really getting into watching at least the tentpoles of the genre, not knowing that it would lead me to become a, you know, an academic on horror films or, you know, a film buff in that genre.
Right.
Um, yeah, it, I watched it and I enjoyed it, but I still find the most unsettling scene is when Reagan's undergoing that MRI test and they stick the needle in to her throat
Mm,
and then
mhm.
remove it once they have like the, you know, connect the tube, then you see the blood just spurt out all over her. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, yeah, it's just so unsettling that the science of it is more unsettling than the supernatural
Yes,
elements to a
yes.
certain point, because it's so not really distant. It's very cold and clinical. Maybe
Yep.
that comes across from the documentary style
No,
Friedkin
yeah.
went for.
I often describe things as clinical when they
Mm-hmm.
affect me. Like when it's
Yeah.
something terrifying on the screen, I'll use that word a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times because that's the stuff that gets to me. I guess I would call her a sex worker going back. I guess that's the proper term I was
That,
supposed to use. Anyway, it's what's interesting to me is that I find that people who I know that are deeply religious and it's like practicing religious, not just saying they are, they're like they go into like two groups: the people who won't watch horror movies and they're really into horror movies. Like there's something about that. I understand it more from the perspective of being more into them because so many of these horror movies are in a weird way pro religion. A
mm-hmm.
lot of them, not all of them obviously, but so
Right.
many of them, the thing is like, oh yeah, they're right, even if they lose out in the end,
Mm-hmm.
they are right in some way.
And a lot of it is from the westernized perspective, with like some exceptions where like you have like the witch or things like that. It's
Right.
very much from a predominantly Catholic perspective.
Yeah. Yep.
But that ties back into the involvement of the church with witch hunts, or like they even had like with the Malleus Maleficarum and things like that.
Mm-mm.
But also their response to folkloric legends in, you know, in countries to the east of the Roman Empire and Western Europe.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Um, but then again, you're seeing that's only a small part of the equation because there's all these other films coming out of Japan, Korea, Taiwan that has their own kind of ghost, religious, spiritual,
Yep. For sure.
folkloric history.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like Kwaidan.
Yep. That's a good one.
Like I read the Cadio Hearn, I think that's his name.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Stories that like uh, you know, inform the film version is it's just so interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I
Uh,
recently saw Cure. Have you ever seen Cure? Japanese movie, I think from
Not yet.
97.
It's on my list.
Let's see. I just want to make
But
sure.
there's also like, oh, what's it like? Jewish horror is making a kind of a little niche of itself right now because there's the Golem that came out. There's Jerusalem, which had a Z instead of the S in the title.
I haven't seen it.
But that's still kind of from like a Western perspective.
Right.
But
They remade Gollum, or are you talking about the old one?
no, it's a new film that's not a remake of the 1920s Golem,
Right. Okay.
but it's this idea of they're just like uh not a town, but there's this community. It's a historical piece, and there's a question of whether someone summoned a golem to have a particular ends meet,
Okay.
and it affects the entire community and things like that.
Right. Right. Yeah, that
So,
sounds awesome. All right.
um,
Well, shit. We're going. This might be what this is one of the longest ones I've had. I think it's
oh
going.
my,
It's closing in on it. So I don't want to
oh,
keep you from too much longer, but I just have a few more questions. Then
yeah.
um, see, I could talk about movies forever. I'm not saying I sound smart when I talk about them, but I could talk about them forever. But what's the last nightmare you remember having?
Oof. You know what? I don't actually remember.
You don't have nightmares often?
No, I think I of course everybody hopefully not hopefully most likely does,
Yeah, yeah.
but usually they fade as the farther you get from them.
Right.
But I do remember one weird dream that was kind of like recurring. It's like, okay, have you seen The Floor is Lava? Probably.
Yeah. I mean, I
But I
haven't
was
seen it, but I know enough
okay, yeah.
about it.
So like I used to have this, like as kids we would play The Floor is Lava, jump from
Of course.
piece of furniture. And I used to have this one that, tying back into arachnophobia, the floor was lava, but this black widow was chasing me all around.
Wow.
So I had to not only avoid the lava, but not get bitten because I felt I couldn't fight back.
Is this arachnophobia something you've always had, or was it stemming from something that you know of?
I think it was just coming in contact with spiders when I was younger.
Mm,
Like there was
wrong
one
place, wrong
time,
time.
pretty much, there was one time I opened the curtain shade, and this was already I was already scared of spiders at this point. To just like see what my grandpa was working on in the backyard,
Yeah.
and there was a black widow on the windowsill. And then technically, some people say you can't hear it, given like the decibel and other things.
Mm, mm.
But apparently, they do this. I heard, to me, I heard it hiss,
Wow.
and
Okay.
some people cannot hear that. That's something more attuned to other animals or other
Yeah.
species can do.
Hmm.
And I just froze and then like slowly backed up and ran into the kitchen to get my grandma.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's terrifying.
Hmm. Yeah, it was
uh,
like one of those like kind of warning back up
right.
things.
Is that your only phobia?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, that's the idea of hearing a spider hiss is freaking
Yeah.
terrifying.
Hmm.
Is there a book or a movie that helped you understand something about yourself?
Oh boy. Aside from Stand by Me,
Yeah, yeah. Something's like, oh, I didn't think about myself in that way, but I think I do agree, or something along those lines.
yeah. Growing up, one of my favorite books was A Wrinkle in Time.
Hmm.
So that was one of those that really got me even more invested in reading, even though I was already reading a lot as a kid.
Hmm. Hmm.
But one of the books that, really had a profound effect on me when I was in college was called Let the Great World Spin by Colin
Okay.
McCann.
Okay. Haven't read it.
And that's, it's a book that ties in the, at least three groups of characters centered around right before 9/11 happened.
Okay.
And it also ties in the tightrope walk between uh, the towers back in the 70s,
Okay.
which was made into a wonderful documentary called Man on Wire,
Yep.
and it was made into the Zemeckis film The Walk. But it just really showed how connected we are, and that was really it's a really powerful piece.
So it like elevated your sense of empathy, kind of. Is that what?
Yeah, I guess
Okay.
that would be the main takeaway for that. Mm-hmm.
Um. All right. Just got two more for you here.
Sure.
Uh, can you think of a time, I guess, ever in your life, whatever comes to
Mm-hmm.
mind, where you were selfless? You acted in like a very
Yeah,
selfless way.
there was, and it also had the interesting after story too. So when I was younger, I was with my grandma. We went to um, we went to Walmart, I believe,
Hmm.
and then right next to the Walmart there was a McDonald's
Okay.
in the same parking lot. So we were driving to the McDonald's parking lot, or into the drive-through, and we order a breakfast, and there was like you got hash browns, and you got like the little like boxed orange juice and
Yep.
stuff. And what I did was like right outside the parking lot, there was a homeless person there, and I you know what I told my grandma, you know what, let's give him the hash brown, let's give him the orange juice. We have orange juice at home. We have hash browns at home.
Hmm.
Part of like we don't really need this, but he really does.
Yeah.
So that's the one of the earliest times when I could remember
Do you remember about
that.
how old you were?
I was in Boy Scouts, and I think I might have been around 10.
Okay.
But the interesting thing was like, so the next day I had a scout meeting, and I really wanted to share it, but it was getting later and later in the day and in the meeting, and people were forgetting. And then it was like, well, if I share this, I had like a moment of clarity. It's like, is it really selfless if you like share with what you did?
Right, right, right.
Because it kind of like it could go back to the biblical idea. It's like, don't let your one hand know what the other's doing,
Yep.
or to like, don't be like the people who pray and then gloat about their deeds and everything, or like try to be like, oh, they go to the extent where like their appearance is like disheveled to show that they are fasting and doing all this stuff. Like,
Yep.
no, just don't be like them, because that's they're not approaching it in perhaps uh, the correct mindset.
Yeah, yeah. So going off that, do you think that could be more about or less about sharing what you did that was selfless and more about like the motive behind why you're sharing? In other words,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I want to share this because it was something that happened in my life. And here's an interesting thing. I did this and this is what happened versus I'm going to say this because it's going to make me look good. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder if it
Right.
has more to do with motive
For
than
me, it
actually
was
sharing it.
for me it was the former. But then the more I kept thinking about it and wanting to tell it, I was thinking, well, you know what? Maybe this might accidentally go into the other
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah,
category, and
yeah.
that would lessen the impact.
Yeah. I,
Um,
I think about this type of stuff often when I see,
hmm,
I actually sent my friend a video the other day of this guy on YouTube going around and like randomly giving strangers like $200, whatever, maybe
mhm,
from all his fans that he had. I don't exactly know why,
right.
but, and I sent it to my friend and he's like, oh, that's so disgusting. I hate, what did he call it? Joy porn or something like that. And I'm like, oh, he's just doing this because it's being filmed and whatever. But I was like, yeah,
Ah,
I get that totally. But at the same time, he really is making someone's day and they like write
mhm,
letters to him and he reads the letters. Like he really is brightening their day, month, year, depending on their
mhm,
situation. And I also think even if his motives are I just want this attention. Like I have this money for free. My fans send it to me. I don't give a shit. Like as long as
mhm.
I still think it's bringing good into the world by potentially inspiring other people to do acts of kindness. So I'm totally okay with that. But my friend
Okay.
was still very sure he was
Yeah.
not. But
But
that kind of
as
stuff
you
is
were
really
saying,
interesting.
there's so much different subtext that might not be considered on first glance.
Yeah, yeah, for
So,
sure.
mhm,
Yeah, just all it took for me is to hear some of these letters that these people wrote to him. And I was like, I
mhm,
don't care. I actually don't care about his motives.
right.
I care about his impact on the world and the good it
Mhm.
brought. Like I think that it brings more good into the world than bad, so I'm totally okay with that.
Oh man, your letters thing that you're talking about reminded me of like how in the past few years, Nick Cave, the musician, has a
Mhm,
website called the Red Hand Files,
mhm,
and especially since after the death of his son, um, he's been you know he's opened up the opportunity for fans to reach out by letter, ask questions, and then his responses are just so genuine. There is no pretense to any of it,
yep,
and even like even in his songs where they explore a lot of different themes ranging from sexuality to what it means to be a person to like thoughts on religion to like
mhm,
a lot of um it's like I don't feel like he's getting any particular um let me rephrase it. I don't feel that in the particular, like in the space, if I have to put him like think in the space he's in, it's like he gets the question and then for just like the next 10 minutes, however long it is, it's just him and that person in conversation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then when he shares the response, it's not about him. He's not getting really anything from this. Maybe it's having him think about certain things and, try to express them in words. But he's still doing this not for the fans in terms of like, oh, this will make me more popular. It'll make people buy more records. It's more like, I really want to know my fans. Um, so that maybe that's kind of like another example of like selflessness, perhaps.
Yeah. I think that one of the things I try to do, I don't even try it. It's just, it feels organic for me, but when I talk to other people about it, it seems like this isn't something everyone strives for or comes organically to them. But it's like having meaningful, not meaningful exactly, I guess just more genuine interactions and being more open is something I think is super important in life. And I don't think it always benefits you to be that way, but I feel like too much of the time we're not genuine with each other. And it sounds so cliche and obvious, but I really do think that, especially in like working environments where I get, you have to have some sort of distance because otherwise things get weird. I still think there's still room for a little bit more personal connection and being genuine with each other.
As you were saying, too much of a, reminds me of something my choir director said. It's like too much of a good thing can become a bad thing.
Yep, for
it's
sure.
like you invest too much. The amount of energy and time and emotional connection that feels that could still have detrimental effects on you, especially if you're such if you're the type of person that really puts them out there for like somebody or some cause and don't take care of what you need first.
Yep.
Then it becomes, it can become a detrimental cycle.
Oh yeah, empathy can be really destructive if you have too much of it. I've learned that a lot in my life.
Especially if it's not returned.
Oh yeah.
But it's not about a quid pro quo. It's,
nope.
It comes from something, an entirely different place.
Yeah, I think empathy is fairly misunderstood. I feel like a lot. I wish I had more compassion than empathy, but my empathy level is high, and it actually holds you back, and in certain cases can make you look like you don't care, because when you're feeling so much pain that someone else is going through, you don't act in a sometimes in a compassionate way because you're so absorbing there. And I don't even mean this in a spiritual way. It's just like this a physical reaction to, like, if I see someone in a hospital bed and they're dying, and like it inside destroys me because I feel like I'm in that bed with them. Like, whereas if I just had more compassion than empathy, I could be like, this is awful, but I'm going to be there to help. This is, you know what I mean? You can act easier.
And
I don't know if I'm making any sense.
I like how you separate the two, because usually people think compassion, empathy are intertwined.
Right.
But I could also see how, like, if you're really empathetic, but it causes you to act in a certain way, it could be like, is this person investing in me, or it could come off as the opposite of what you want it to be. It'd be like, oh, this person doesn't think about them. Some people might think that the person who's trying to be empathetic be like, oh no, this person's a narcissist. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Because there's to be like, well, what are they saying about what they're getting out of this by doing this? Or like, maybe it's not outwardly shown to the other person who's on the receiving end. It's very difficult.
Yep. I also think it could potentially lead, depending on the situation and how much empathy the person has, it could potentially lead to avoidance of situations because it's too painful. And it's like, you could be a great person, you can have a lot of compassion, but if you have too much empathy, like, you won't go to the hospital to visit them. And it won't be because you don't care. It won't be because I don't feel like dealing with that, I'm too busy or whatever. It's because when you go there, it affects you in a deep way that feels like you're being eaten alive inside, versus just going there, being there for the person and not having.
It could also feed into a sense of helplessness, that you want to do something else in that situation, but you can't.
Yep. Well, look, we're freaking. I have one more. I mean, like I said this before in a few other episodes. Or like, I am such a long form type person where, like, in short bursts,
Mhm.
I'm not good. I need hours to talk to someone to get to my points because my brain is all rattled. And like,
Mhm.
there's so many things I said even this episode where I'm like, I didn't exactly mean that, or I wanted to say that differently. But
Let's move on to the last
yeah.
question
This is
then,
the
if
last
you're
question.
okay.
Um, tell me about a memory that you have that when you think about, you consistently feel happy, or if you don't have one that you go to on purpose, just a memory that makes you feel happy in your life. Could be anything.
There's one, it's maybe
Could be even mundane.
like I could like it when I look at photographs, I could kind of remember the situation that
Yep.
occurred. But one that really comes back to me is when and there is a photograph of this, but this is like probably the earliest one that I remember. I might have been 2 or 3. And I don't know why I keep coming back to like the early childhood ones as far as I remember, or at
Yeah.
least in this conversation. But
No, I do the same thing in
there's
life.
one particularly where my grandpa loves moccasins.
Okay.
Um, and I kind of like grew to appreciate them myself. And when I was young, so I would just like not even the height of this table that I'm sitting at. I was like really small. And it's getting late at night. I'm staying over with the grandparents, and my grandpa's in his room. So I decide I just sneak over and grab his moccasins, and I'm just like plopping down the hallway with them. And like, of course, they're like going like this because my feet are really tiny.
Right. Right.
And then my grandma had to be at the end of the hall and just captured, my grandpa just could be like, oh, who took my moccasin? And he sees me kind of like, when you transition into that playful role of like, wait a minute,
Yep.
but also like, yeah. And it was just a really nice kind of a memory. I remember that one a lot. I mean, and then you could also like catch glimpses of like, oh, I remember when like my grandpa hung a little kind of like an airplane swing right next to the living room
Mm,
from like the doorway outline there, or
right.
something like that.
That's
Or
awesome.
like I would always have like a favorite kind of a purple blanket or something.
Is this
um
the moccasin memory? Is this something you talk about often, or is it just in your head usually?
it's usually in my head, although if people ask me what my earliest memory was, that would probably have to be
That's your
it.
go-to. Okay, that's
Yeah,
awesome that
because
there's
I
an
don't know
actual
if I could
photo of it.
remember any of that, anything else much. Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you so many questions about your grandpa and all that stuff, but at this point, we're way too. But
Yeah,
first of all, thanks so much for doing this. This
you're
is
welcome.
really
Yeah,
nice. Is
this is
there
fun.
anywhere people could follow you that you want them to find you, or?
Oh yeah. So I am on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I have a writing portfolio online, seanwoodard.com. So you could follow me on any of those platforms. You can find me at Drunk Monkeys, since I'm the film editor there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and
Okay,
I'm also
awesome.
right for Horror Buzz. Um, so yeah. Anyway,
Awesome. All right. Well, look, thanks again for doing this. I really appreciate
you're
it.
welcome.
All
Yeah.
right. I'll talk to you later.
Take care. Bye bye.